Hey everyone, we have the tier list for patch 16.2. This is a weird patch because everything is flipped on its head. Because the three best comps from the previous patch, Piltover, Diana, and Tryndamere, are all in the bottom right now. They are all completely unplayable, so we have to learn a lot of new comps. So starting off in the S tier, we have Bilgewater. There are two versions of this build. We have the classical Misfortune build, and we also have the new Fizz version. We're going to cover how to play both of those along with every other comp in this video. And then after that, we have Ryze Ziggs. This might be one of the most powerful legendary style board or Ryze board that we've seen. So you definitely need to learn these two comps and play them as much as you can right now. In the A tier, we have Singed Seraphine. So Singed Seraphine is the new lose streak comp. Instead of going for Diana, you go for Singed. He unlocks after you lose 35 HP. After that, we have Void Kaisa, very solid comp still. Sona Reroll, gonna be bumping that up, adding that into the tier list. It had some niche usage last patch, but now, after everything else got nerfed, definitely a viable comp. Demacia, still solid. Veigar Yordles, that's gonna be added here. And then we also still have Brock here in the end of the A tier. Still a very solid guy to kind of use. After that, in the B tier, we have Ekko, we have Yunara bumped down. Yunara is still playable, just not as good. Shadow Isles is still here, and along with all the other comps. But again, the main changes are Piltover, Diana, and Tryndamere. Do not play them until further notice. Check back often at bunnymuffins.lol/meta. Starting off in the S tier, we have the Bilgewater comp. We have the Fizz version and the MF version. The MF one, just to refresh everyone's memory, that was around Lucian, Sona, and then combining it with the MF for the Gunslinger, and then you get your Tahm Kench out there. You play 5 to 7 Bilgewater in the early to mid game. Get a lot of Silver Serpents, use them. Try to get a tank item for Tahm Kench, try to get Captain's Brew, maybe some of the other items for Misfortune, and then build Lucian and Sona items, put them on Misfortune, and then once you get Lucian, swap them over. And for tanks in the early game, you could use something like Nautilus. Nautilus is optional to 3-star, but it is nice to have. But that was pretty much the crux of the build. Pretty solid, but right now Fizz is absolutely smacking people right now. So you could combine this build with something like Ziggs. Ziggs works out really well because he's a Yordle. So you can unlock him really easily through the Fizz. Because the way to unlock Ziggs is by having 3 items on a Yordle or Zon unit. So with this Fizz, you want stuff like Edge of Night, Rabadon's Death Cap, very nice stuff to have on him. And then for his little black market item, you want black market explosives. That's going to be the best one. It's like made for Fizz. It'll show like recommended item holder Fizz there. So you just put it on him and you have a great day. Same rules apply to Tahm Kench. He uses the same items and stuff, and you do want a tank item on him still. And then for your main tank, you could use Wukong, you could use a 3-star Nautilus, either or. And then you just drop in some legendaries. Kindred makes a lot of sense since you're playing Twist of Fate. Shyvana makes a lot of sense because Nautilus is a juggernaut. And then Ziggs makes a lot of sense because he is a Yordle that you could get from Fizz. Going back into how to play the comp though, you want to unlock Bilgewater as early as possible and start collecting Silver Serpents because the earlier you get them, the earlier you can kind of upgrade your early game units in order to stabilize a little bit earlier. I do have the full notes down here, but just to sum up, stats are also good to buy in the shop though, because before in the previous build with Misfortune, a lot of people were skipping out on the stats a lot, but I see it being very viable if you already have all your upgrades and you don't have any of the items that you want in your shop. It's a good way to get some refreshes because again, Fizz is going to be doing a lot of work. You're going to be running more Bilgewater units. If you're running 3, like in this build, the added stats don't really do that much, but when you have a lot more, then the stats definitely have a bigger impact. So that's why people are buying a lot more stats now than before with the Fizz version. 1, because Fizz can use almost anything, and 2, because you're getting a lot more value from it. Also, Ziggs might just be the best legendary unit of this patch, so he's going to be played in a lot of comps that we're going to go over. Speaking of Ziggs, in the next comp, we have Ryze Ziggs. What other names can we use for this here? Rising, Ziggurat, or something like that? I don't know. But as with every Ryze comp, it's a little tricky. You can't play it every single game because you need to get to level 9. But the way to unlock Ryze here is by playing Ionia, Zon, Piltover, and Yordle. You could do that by getting an Ionia start, unlocking Kennen pretty early, combine it with Piltover because you're playing Vi for Defender and then Caitlyn, and then add in some Zon units such as Mundo and any other Zon unit, and then also have in a Yordle. So it might be a little tricky. You might be wondering, how do I unlock both Ryze and Ziggs at level 9? Does it take 2 turns? The answer is no, because once you hit level 9, you could play a Zon unit instead of Ziggs and any Yordle instead of Ryze, and then you'll unlock both of them on the next turn, assuming you have 3 items on a Zon or Yordle unit to unlock the Ziggs as well as the Ryze. Since you're running 2 heavy bombs in the back, no pun intended, you need to have some solid tank options up front. So I would definitely focus on building my first pair of AP items, ideally on Ryze, but it really depends on what items you built early. If you had a Rage Blade, focus more on the Ziggs, and then after that, focus on tank items, and then go back and itemize your other carry. Another thing you could do in the early game is play around Yordles. Yordles can give you decent stabilization, and you have a lot of good item holders to kind of use for these items later on in the game, such as using Teemo, or even something like a Tristana. Honestly, a lot of different openers work. I've seen people use Sona, I've seen people just build a Rage Blade and then go into this if they randomly unlock Kennen. So there are a lot of paths to the same destination. The only thing that's common is that you need to reach level 9, so having some econ augment or a win streak early is going to be really, really good, or generate a bunch of econ from Yordles. If you are going Yordles though, in the mid game you want to reach level 8 as soon as possible. You can break leveling rules and level up a little bit earlier than you normally would, because getting to 8 Yordle means you're getting loot every single round, which obviously is going to replace all the interest that you lose from leveling up early. I did say that the tricky part is unlocking both the Ryze and the Ziggs at the very end. What you can do is aim to go to level 9 on stage 4-7, that way you unlock them both on the neutral round, but again, worst case scenario, you could always sack one of the later rounds and level up on stage 5-1 or 5-2 to unlock them, because you still need to be able to afford them after you level up, because it is a bit expensive. It's going to be 7 plus 5 gold, which is going to be 12. Some recommended augments for this comp, other than the obvious need for econ, is item augments are also really good, because you need the items eventually, and they help you out in the early game to kind of save HP. And one other helpful tip to kind of use when you are playing Ryze and Ziggs is that you want to save at least 2 lives by the time you unlock these 2 units, because that gives you some time to get them to 2-star and also gives you a nice little cushion. Having this at 1 life is a bit unreliable, because this comp, while very strong, it isn't the strongest thing ever. Like, you are allowed to have 1 life if you're unlocking stuff like Baron Nashor, if you're unlocking stuff like a Brock with a huge Ixtal cash out, but for something like Ryze and Ziggs, you need 2 lives in order to survive 1 hit from one of those 2 team comps, and then 2-star your people, and then ideally win after that. But this is a super duper duper strong comp right now. It gets even more powerful because emblems are really OP right now. I made a note of that up here. Any emblems are just super 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 strong. So if you ever get offered them, you absolutely need to be taking those augments, because 1, it's going to make it easy to unlock Ryze, and 2, they're just strong in general because they give so many stats. I think it gives like maybe 0.7 of an item or something like that, plus you get the trait. So it is pretty big. I don't know the exact math. It's going to depend on the exact emblem, but most of them give very, very good stats compared to what they used to give. Next build up we have is going to be the A tier. So we are going to start off with the Singed Seraphine comp. This comp is very good, again, if you are lose streaking. So Singed is very good with this little item combo. He's got the Morello, the Void Staff, and the Bloodthirster. And if you don't have Morello, you could use a Sunfire Cape, but it's a very solid build as a backup plan, because if you don't have anything going for you, well, you lost 35 life, and then Singed can be a very possible unit to use. He also uses pretty flexible items, because if you are going AP, you might have built a Morello or a Void Staff anyways, so you could either go for some random AP comp, and if it works out, great, and if not, you could always pivot into this and use pretty much the same items. You just need like the little Bloodthirster that he has here. After that, you want to play some Seraphine. Seraphine's pretty solid. And then Rift Herald's a very good unit to add, because he plays Disruptor with Malzahar, which shares that with Seraphine, and then he also has Bruiser with Mundo. After that, just make sure you have some Juggernaut so that your Singed gets his little buff, so drop in Swain. Nico's going to be Arcanist and a Defender, and then Vi is going to be a Defender along with Zon, giving you a lot of traits here. So if you ever get like Bronze for life, this is one of those possible boards. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different traits. That's quite a bit. Stand United also works out really, really well. In the backline, you want to focus on your Seraphine. Mana items are good. Jeweled Gauntlet's good. You don't need Morello on her because you already have that on Singed, but obviously you could use it on her before you get Singed. And then main tank is going to be Rift Herald, and then leftover tank on your Swain. This comp works out pretty well with a bunch of different items, because you do have a bunch of different forecasts you can play. And then when you level up, you could throw in one of those random legendary units. You could also do some replacement swaps. For example, Swain can be Shyvana instead. Malzahar can be an Azir. Rift Herald can be a Wukong. Mundo or Vi can be a Ziggs. There's a lot of different things you could run here in the late game. This is just one of the possible boards you could play with Singed and Seraphine. But essentially, lose 35 player life, field some Zons and Juggernauts, and go have a big party. So obviously you want to lose streak if you can with an econ augment, And then whenever you need to stabilize, do a little bit of rolling to make sure you meet the requirements of unlocking Singe, and then just start stabilizing after that. Just make sure before you unlock your Singe, you actually have items he can use so you could actually stabilize around him. If you're playing Singe and you don't have any items, then he's not going to be that useful. Next comp up, we go back into normal territory where we're playing Void Kaisa. Nothing too much has really changed here. They did buff up the AD build a little bit. We can go ahead and do some data checking on that right now. Just drop in Kaisa there. You could do Diamond Plus, Master Plus, Emerald Plus, whatever rank you want to do. You don't even have to do the plus. You could remove some at the top also, whichever you find the best results with. But I'd say if you are Diamond Plus, use Diamond Plus. If you use Master Plus, the sample size becomes a little bit small. But if you're below Diamond, you could use very specific ranking. Like if you're Platinum, I'd probably just use like Emerald, Plat, and Gold. Because I think the data is a little bit more relevant in those ranks, because there are a lot of comps that are very good in higher ratings and very bad in lower ratings, and there are comps that are very good in lower ratings and very bad at higher ratings, and you don't get to know that unless you play around with it correctly. But let's look at the builds a little bit. They haven't changed too much. AP is still the better build, but AD is not as bad as it once was. It is still usable, but I would stick with the AP at this point. Rageblade, Jeweled Gauntlet plus Hextech Gunblade, that's going to be the way to go. The AD build is going to be with the Infinity Edge, Spear of Shojin, and then third item doesn't really matter. Some people do Last Whisper, some people do Striker's Flail, some people use Giant Slayer. I think Last Whisper is probably the most consistent. I'm sure you could use other stuff as well though. But pretty much this build revolves around two different paths, either going for level 10 and unlocking Baron, or just doing a fast 8 for Kaisa. So if you want to just top 4, go for Kaisa. If you're trying to go for the win, go for Baron. You have to identify that during your game. So if you are super high health, winning everything, have an econ augment, maybe it's a portal that gives a ton of resources like Scuttle Puddle or Gold Subscription, then yeah, you could definitely go for Baron. But if you are on a lower resource portal, maybe you lost a bit, then you have to go for the Kaisa. And there's nothing wrong with Kaisa. Top 4s are great, don't get me wrong there, but it's just one of those decisions you're going to have to make in one of your games. If you are playing for Kaisa, focus on Kaisa items early. Rageblade going to be the most important, and then focus up on your Rift Herald's tank items. It could be any tank items, but you need to make sure you have anti-heal in some way in this team comp. And just like every other comp in TFT, you need a balance between tanking and damage items. His only real important item is going to be the Sterix. Obviously, i.e. Handed Justice is going to be a good combo. Bloodthirster also works there, but they're a bit less important to kind of get on him. But one good item holder to use for that is going to be Rek'Sai, and you can always switch it to any other Vanquisher, like Gangplank can use it if you're playing him temporarily. Bel'Veth can use it once you unlock her. So there are ways to get to Baron, but I would focus on Baron items if you are doing that, because once you get him, you need items for him because you kind of sack your whole game for him. And as we learned in our TFT fundamentals video, and in case you missed that, there are two links here, the basics of TFT and the fundamentals of TFT, that should point you in the right direction, and you will know that you need to itemize the units that you actually play around. So that's why it's not that easy to just play Kaisa and then later on realize, oh, let me just go Baron instead, because once you do unlock the Baron, you're going to have no items for him because you focus everything on Kaisa and the Rift Herald. So unless you get a lot of item augments, just focus on one of the two different carries or one of the two different playstyles and leave it at that. Both are good, both are usable. It really just depends on what is happening in your game. Next build up we have is going to be Sona Reroll. So Sona Reroll works a bit funky. So if you have a lot of early Sonas and Jarvans, you can consider going for this. Her build is also really, really goofy. It's going to be Archangel's Jeweled Gauntlet, Nashor's Tooth. Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. I've tried building Spear of Shojin on her, and it just really doesn't work compared to what build we have here. Archangel's really good because it allows her to stack up. Demacia's, they do like the longer-ish fights. Jeweled Gauntlet is necessary because it needs her to crit, and crit works really well when you have stacking AP, and the Nashor's Tooth just works really well with crit items because every time you crit, you gain a little bit of mana, and invokers love gaining mana, so you still do need a mana item, it's just in a different way. After that, Lux is going to use some other AP items. Don't be afraid if you build too many of them. Jarvan going to use whatever tank items you got. And then Vayne can use the Runons plus anything else you have for her that is AD focus. Galio can use pretty much anything from the bench. Dragon Claw is a pretty good item on Galio also because he's able to get a lot of bonuses from the magic resistance. But pretty much if you have a lot of Sonas and Jarvans play this comp, you pretty much just do a 1-cost reroll where you do not level at all and then econ up for a 3-1 roll down. And you want to hit Sona 3-star by stage 3-5 or 4-1 if possible. The best early game board is going to be something like Sona, Jarvan, Poppy, and a Defender and Invoker. You may ask, what does that look like? We can just head on over to the team builder, add in Jarvan, Sona, and Poppy, and then just literally anyone. It could be something like an Anivia, it could be something like a Vi or a Nico. Any defender can do. It could even be Rumble, depending on who you get. And then this is going to be the base for most of your game. Obviously, once you get better stuff, you can replace them. Like, I'm sure you want something else other than Anivia. So once you do get Kabuko, you could go ahead and use him instead. But if you haven't realized yet, for augments, you want something that helps you reroll a bit more. That allows you to hit the Sona very, very early and allows you to play the rest of the board, which actually is pretty expensive because if you do 1-cost reroll, it's hard to get a bunch of the 4 costs. But item augments are also really good because Demacians love items. The reason why they love items is because the trait Demacia just gives them a lot of stats. So if you do have a lot of stats, you want to stack them harder with a bit of items. If you compare that to some of the builds that don't really stack stats, like for example, Void, it concentrates the power into 3 different Void units. You really just care about those 3. If you're playing something like this, where you're not really playing any of the deep traits, then obviously some of the leftover units don't really matter that much either, so you don't need to itemize them. But if you're playing 7 Demacia, like in the Sona reroll build, it definitely helps out quite a bit. Going into the next build, we have the actual 7 Demacia. That one is without rerolls. This one actually drops Sona in favor of Xin Zhao, and then you play something like Ziggs in the late game. Ziggs Vayne is an absolutely incredible combo because Ziggs is so much more powerful now. Vayne is obviously a monster on her own. You could still play around Lux carry. You don't have to use Vayne or Lux every time. Like, you could just see what items you have and then itemize for that, or just see what units you're naturaling during your rolldowns. If you are getting a lot of Vaynes, you can go for the 3-star, but if not, let her go. You know, sometimes when you are texting someone in the talking stage and they don't respond, you know, it's not the first time they just stopped using their phone in their whole life, right? Clearly, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. So if you're not getting the 3-star, go for Lux instead. Then in the late game, you get the Ziggs in there, and then you're really cooking because Ziggs is just OP on this patch, and you still get the benefit from the Vayne long shots, right? You just don't need to run like a carry Vayne. Obviously, if you built 2 Kraken Slayers, like, yeah, you probably do have to hard force Vayne, but honestly, by the time you get the second Kraken Slayer, or you're thinking about building it, you know whether you have her or not. But overall, this build's really easy. I do recommend this build a lot for beginners. Actually, both of these builds I recommend, like both the Sona reroll and the 7 Demacia. It just plays itself, and it's not too complicated. You don't need to make too many decisions, but obviously you still need to play good TFT fundamentals. Next build up we have is going to be the Veigar Yordle build. This build's really fun. This involves 2 hats, and yeah, like if you have a way to build 2 Rabadons, go ahead and do it. Unlock Veigar. If you have Yordle start, it makes it a lot easier, because obviously Veigar is a Yordle, and then you want to play something like we have here. So we have Veigar and Ziggs in the back. Like, always play Ziggs if he fits at all, because he's just OP right now. He's like the equivalent to what like Lucian and Senna were last patch. You just play him if you are able to. And then in the front line, we have Wukong main tank, we have Fizz as our secondary, and then we have the rest of the squad with Shyvana and Swain being the random 2 throw-in units, and then Kennen, Kabuko, and Rumble as the Yordle trait bots. So items for Veigar, going to be a bit interesting, so we're going to cover that now. So you don't want to put both the hats on him. It's like too many hats, right? But you put one of them on him because who else is going to use it? But then after that, you want to focus on mana items. So either blue buff or Shojin will work. Doesn't really matter which. And then third item, it also could kind of be anything. You don't really need Jeweled Gauntlet because this spell crits already, but you could do something like a Giant Slayer, Adaptive Helm, like double mana item I've seen works out pretty well too, like the Shojin or the Adaptive Helm. Like obviously Void Staff can be useful, but you probably want that on someone else. Giant Slayer, Nashor's Tooth is good because again, he already crits. Striker's Flail, as we talked about before, but there are a lot of different builds you could kind of use on him. Pretty much any AP item works. You don't have to be that strict about it. And then throw on the utility items onto your Ziggs. Again, you need a lot of rods to play this. If you don't have at least one at the start, I wouldn't even consider doing this build unless you got a crazy augment that helps you do it. And sometimes if you build a Thieves Gloves, you could randomly get Hat. So you could sometimes build Hat, have the Thieves Glove, and then eventually get Veigar, but it is a bit unreliable, but sometimes it happens. But apart from that, Strong Yordle Opener is pretty good for this team comp because it's a good AP opener and you end up playing a lot of the units anyways. I'd say you want to complete your second death cap sometime in stage 3. So after stage 3-2, you see your augment. If both augments didn't help you get 2 death caps, then you probably need to go something else. Maybe you can salvage the game by going a Singe build by building like Morello plus a Void Staff and just going for him with your AP items. Or if your first pick on Carousel, maybe you could luck out into getting that extra rod. In stage 4, you want to get to level 8 at that point, play 8 Yordle for a little bit, get your Veigar 2, and then later on you could drop down to the 6 Yordle build we have here. That's of course usually going to happen in the later parts of the game after you get capped out. Maybe you get the 2-star Ziggs, get the Shyvana in, get the 2-star Swain in. That's the kind of time where you want to drop out from 8 Yordle and go down to 6. But if you're winning rounds, you don't need to do it. But if you're getting a bit low, then you want to take him out. But for your super late game cap, it's going to be Ziggs. He's just the strongest Yordle unit, one of the strongest units in general, as we've been saying. And he's going to be how you turn those second and thirds into a first. Next build up we have is going to be the Brock Fast 9 build. Nothing too much has changed here. Like, they did nerf some of the cash outs a little bit. So it isn't as insta-win as it was before, but it still is very strong. Definitely do not underestimate it. There are 2 builds here. There's like the Invoker version and the AD version. Doesn't really matter which, it just depends what units you're hitting. But yeah, this comp is weaker, but it still is playable. And I'd say personally, you should only play this if you were playing it already in the previous patch, because knowing how to navigate like the bad cash outs or having to cash out early is crucial in order to maximize the potential of this comp. And if you just never played this before and you don't know that, you're going to take a lot of 8ths, and it's up to you whether you want to pay the LP tax or not. So I'm going to leave that decision up to you. That's a personal decision. I'm not in charge of your LP. Only you are. So I can only recommend going for the Brock comp if you already have experience playing it from last patch. Of course, if you want to just have fun, then yeah, go for it. It is a pretty fun comp to play, but if you don't know which quest to pick, it's going to be a little troublesome. It's a little more difficult than people give it credit for. Because obviously sometimes the decisions are easy, but sometimes it gives you 3 really tough choices, and you have to know whether to take one of them or just cash out and just forget about it. Next, let's go into the B tier. We have the Ekko Reroll build. This is going to be the only build we are going to cover from the B tier just because it's new, but this is one of those viable reroll options that you have. And this is going to be with 5 Zon, 4 Juggernaut. Ekko is going to be a disruptor, so you still do play disruptors with Seraphine. You're going to combine that with the Piltover team because you're playing Vi, so you just play Vi plus Seraphine, and then you just play a bunch of Zon units. After playing on this patch a little bit, I did a little spiel in my previous videos of like name 5 Zon units. Like, I'm pretty sure I can name 100 women faster than I could have named 5 Zon units in the last patch, but now I am more versed in Zon units. I am a Zon lover, so in this team comp, you're going to be running Jinx, Vi, Blitzcrank, Singed, and Ekko. And I know they buffed Jinx a bunch in the recent patch, but I heard she's still a little bit bugged. That's not confirmed, that's just what I've been hearing. But I also haven't seen people complain about Jinx being OP or anything like that, so I'm going to be assuming that that might be the reason why. Because honestly, she did get a lot of buffs. If a build for Jinx does come out in the future, I will be adding it. So again, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. Bookmark the site, share it with your friends. You know, it's not an NFT, right? You could give it to anyone you want. But that's always going to be the most updated source for, well, everything. But in this build, you want to do Ekko with kind of like the Diana build. It's a little funny. You do the Rageblade, Bloodthirster, Titans combo. We can see here that he doesn't really need the crit build with Jeweled Gauntlet plus Hand of Justice. He's mainly just auto-attacking and whacking people a lot with this type of build. So it plays quite similarly. So the items are very similar, but it plays a little bit differently because obviously you're doing 2-cost reroll. You're also adding Singed in there for great utility. He's just amazing for Void Stat plus Morello, right? Like, I don't think there's a better user in the game for it. And then you could use Swain as one of your tanks, or you could even reroll for something like Vi or Nico and use them as tanks instead. But the game plan is you want to stabilize on stage 3 around Ekko 2-star and then do a slow roll for Ekko 3. So in the early part of the game, play around melee carries. If you get an Ekko, great. Like, that's definitely a sign to go for this. But if you want to just hard force this, maybe you got some insane reroll augment on stage 2 and you're like, oh, I have the items for it, let me go for this. Just use any melee carry to hold his items. It could be something like a Briar or something like that, or a Kiana. And then you want to just play and roll at stage 3-2 and spike around Ekko 2 with items and then use that to stabilize. Aim to hit Ekko 3 by stage 4-5. And then your level 8s and 9s are just adding in more synergies, such as like more Zon or something like more Juggernauts. You could also run something like Azir in the late game. That could be good too. Replace Seraphine as a disruptor and then run a bunch of Shurimas as your late game cap. Lots of different options you have there. But the items are the most important. You absolutely need the best in slot Ekko items because nothing else works on him except for artifacts. Speaking of artifacts, let's just cover that right now. What are some of the good artifacts on Ekko, you may ask? Well, obviously, a lot of the melee carry items ones will do, but I think Wit's End is by far the best one. It gives him everything he needs. It's an auto-attacking magic item that also heals him, so it's like, it's pretty much all his items in one. It has the attack speed from Rage Blade, and it also just gives a lot of stats, which is what Titans gives, so it pretty much does everything. But some other options like Seeker Armed Guard can be good, Mittens can be really good. Mittens is just good on any melee carry. You could use Death's Defiance to replace your Bloodthirster. Zonia's Paradox is going to be great as well. Flicker Blade is okay, but pretty much anything that gives AP going to be at least okay on him, but the melee ones are going to be preferred. But yeah, that's going to be the build there. Don't play any of the comps that you played a lot before because they're just donkey doodle. That's going to be the Piltover T-Hex, Diana, and the Tryndamere build. But if you're looking for comps of one trick, I think Singed Seraphine is going to be one of those comps. Yunara is still very viable. It's just a bit weaker than it was last time. We could take a look at it right now, actually. There's a Freljord version, Ionia version. Both work still. They actually buffed a bunch of the other Ionias, so it isn't like that much worse or anything like that, but they did hurt Yunara a bit. They nerfed Kraken Slayer a little bit, so obviously this build isn't as good as it once was, but definitely still is viable if you want to play it. If you still want to do like the Volibear, Ryze stuff, that can still be done. But yeah, you pretty much just build IE Kraken Rageblade on her and hope for the best. And then Set does a lot of work too, but I don't think Set's like that great compared to the other like unlockable legendaries. Like, yeah, he's still good, like don't get me wrong, but he isn't like super good, such as like Ziggs or something like that, or like Volibear. Volibear actually cleans up house. But how am I going to approach the patch? What are some ideas for you? I'm gonna do an opener check first. So if you have Bilgewater, great, go for Bilgewater. Any emblems, it's like, all right, just hard force that comp. You just have like the super strong emblem. So if you see random emblem from an augment at the start of the game, just always take it and see what you get and try your best to work around it. You could always play something like the Ryze. Ryze Ziggs is really strong, so if you are strong, go for Ryze Ziggs if you win streak. If you want to reroll, Sona or Ekko are going to be your options. Not sure what to do. Demacia is always an option if you have some Demacia upgrades, and if not, you can lose streak into Singed Seraphine. That's going to be a pretty good game plan that pretty much covers everything. So let me know down in the comments below whether you have any questions. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. I am going to be doing the coaching videos. I think like I'm going to do a bunch of them. So submit your games here, bunnymuffins.lol, go to submit, and then fill out the form, upload your games, and I'll try to go through as many as I can during the week. I'm also going to do an opener guide. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to be formatting that, but definitely look out for that in the next couple of days. But that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.